In this video we're going to have a look at how to interpret narratives. Three things that we need to take in consideration. The first one is characteristics of narratives. There are actually two main characteristics of narratives. The first one is a chronological framework. Narratives come to us in a chronological framework. It means that the events happen in a certain timeline. Like you have first Moses in the basket, and then the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's daughter showed up, and then Miriam talked to Pharaoh's daughter. So it happens in a chronological framework. The other characteristic will be non-prescriptive. A narrative will not tell you exactly how to think and how to feel and how to react, because it is non-prescriptive. Therefore, the message of narratives is implied. It's not explicit. Like when you read Paul, Paul will be explicit in his instructions. Do that, love one another, you need to forgive. When narratives, it's more implied. A second thing that we need to take in consideration will be the kinds or genres. You have different kinds or genres of narratives. The first one will be stories. You have many stories in the Bible, like the story of Moses in the basket, Joseph in the well. Another one is allegory. Characters and events are actually symbols of something else, like the sower and the seed in Matthew 13. The seed represents people who will be the gospel. Dramatic history, like the birth of Jesus Christ, will be dramatic history. That's another form of narratives. Another one will be parables, like the parable of the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son. Another kind of narrative is conversation. Jesus had many conversations with his people, that's disciples and other people. And the last one will be apocalyptic. That is actually, the word means to reveal. Apocalyptic narratives will be about dreams and visions of the future. It comes to us in symbolism, like the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation will be a narrative, but it's apocalyptic. A third thing that we need to take in consideration when we interpret the narratives will be the plot structure. Plot structure. Now, the plot structure is the way in which the story develops to keep the interest of the audience. Otherwise, you will easily lose interest in a story. So what's the purpose of the elements of plot structure? It creates tension. Like the one element will create tension, and another element will resolve that tension. Now, there are three ways to do that in a plot structure to create tension. The first one is there will be a plan, like in the book of Acts. The book of Acts begins with a plan to reach the people with the gospel at the ends of the world. So that creates tension. How is that going to happen? And then the rest of the book of Acts will be the execution. The execution of that plan. And then there's a second one that creates tension. That is a mystery. Just take the riddle of Samson. Samson told a riddle in Judges 14, and it creates tension. What is the riddle? So there needed to be the explanation of that riddle, and that is how the tension is being resolved. A third one, and that's the major one in the Bible that creates tension. That is a problem. And then, like Moses is in the basket, it's a problem because Pharaoh wants to kill the newborn Jewish babies. And then what is the resolution or the solution of the problem? So this is the major one in the Bible, problem and resolution. So it will be elements in the story below the surface that will create tension. And then as the story develops, there will be a resolution of the tension. Now, when we get to the interpretation of the narratives of the Bible, we use exactly the same plots or method as in the other videos. It is the GPS method. And the GPS method actually has three major steps. And the first one is understanding, then you have application, and then you have communication. That's the GPS method. And we're going to apply this method with in consideration the characteristics, the kind of narratives, as well as the plot structure. When we take that in consideration, we're going to use the same GPS method, and we're going to apply that on a well-known passage in the Bible, that is Genesis 37. It's a well-known passage. It's about Joseph and his brothers. Joseph needed to go to visit his brothers. They were tending the flocks, and now we will see the different elements of Genesis 37. So as I mentioned in the previous videos, we use the same GPS method, and we're going to start with the process of understanding. And in the process of understanding, we have seen in the other videos that we use the acronym of START. And the S is situation. So what is the situation of Genesis 37? The situation is that Joseph needed to go to his brothers who were tending the flock to see how they're doing, and he needed to tell his dad what was going on. So that is the situation. The second thing is, what is the type of literature? And we know it is a narrative and it's a story. And then the third one is, now we need to analyze it. So we know the situation, we know the type of literature, and now we're going to analyze it. So what we normally do, you read through the passage, so we can do that, and that's the way we analyze it. We dig into the passage. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the son of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. And then verse 10, when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is the dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So when we analyze this story, we can first have a look at where is the tension. Well, we get the tension right here in verse 2. This is the account of Jacob. He's a young man of 17. He was tending the flocks with his brothers, the son of Bilhah and the son of Zilpah. And he brought their father a bad report. So he actually gossiped. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his brothers. He loved them more than any of his brothers. That's another kind of tension you have. So you see in the first two verses here, verses 2 and 3, you have tension. And that tension is actually because of gossip and because of favoritism. Because Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other brothers. And then from verse 4, we see that there is actually a reaction to this kind of tension, a resolution, but it's not always positive, the resolution. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more, so there is now is the reaction. They saw something. They hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. And then it continues that he had a dream. He told his brothers. They hated him all the more. So you see there, it's very strong. The word hate. And you also have it there in verse 4. They loved him more and hated him. There you have it. Hated him and they hated him all the more. When he told his father as well as his brothers, their father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I also bow to you?" So we can see from verse 4 and further on, you have the relief of tension. So there you have the tension. Now you have the relief of tension. You can actually see, in a way, it creates more tension, but this is actually the reaction to the tension. And what is the reaction to the tension is that they actually have a dislike in their brother. So it's gossip, it's favoritism. What is it going to do? Then it gets to the resolution of the tension. They disliked him. And normally, it's not always the case, but normally there is an outcome in any narrative. And the outcome in this narrative is that, tension in the family. It is a lot of family issues. Tension in family. That's the outcome. But we don't need to be technical about this, but all I want to show you is that below the surface of a story there's something that creates tension, and then it builds up, and then there's a reaction to this tension, and normally then there is the outcome. What you also can do is to summarize each verse. Like verse 2 will be gossip, and verse 3 will be favoritism, and verse 4 will be the hatred. You can see it's a lot of emotion of his brothers. And then from 5, and we've skipped a few verses, to verse 10 will be about Joseph and his dreams. And then we can see that there is an unhappy family because of Joseph's arrogance. Unhappy family. And then it's actually not that difficult to summarize the message. One can say, arrogance plus favoritism, plus favoritism can cause lots of turmoil in a family. So one can say maybe this is the message of Genesis 37. Arrogance and favoritism can cause lots of turmoil in a family. And then we go back. So we see this is the result of our analysis. Favoritism and arrogance causes a lot of turmoil. And then the next question that we need to ask, does it relate to the rest of the Bible? And we see, yes, it relates to the rest of the Bible. You just need to read all the wisdom literature that arrogance is bad. And then you read other Bible commentaries to test your finding, and then you realize that the message to the original receiver is arrogance and favoritism can cause a lot of turmoil. And then in the process of application, this is the second process, application, you determine whether it's cultural, and we see it's not cultural. And the second one is it ceremonial? No, it's not ceremonial. There are no blood involved. It's not ceremonial. Is it civil? Is it a bylaw? No, the message has nothing to do with bylaws. It's actually moral. So the civil, the cultural, and the ceremonial laws, those are incidentals, and the moral is an essential. So we see that this message is applicable to us, and now we can communicate this message in the 21st century, and it's applicable in every situation. That arrogance and all the other bad things like gossip can cause a lot of turmoil. In the other videos that will follow, we will use the same GPS method on other narratives of the Bible, so that we can acquire the skill how to interpret narratives.